All right. Well, for context, I'm wearing the official, if you can see it. This is the Juneteenth flag. Uh, the June with the I don't know if anyone can see it. I know I got this blurred
Yeah, I can see
thing
it.
on there. You said good. So this is the Juneteenth flag that was adopted, I don't know, many years ago. I don't know the history on the flag itself, but basically we have the red, white, and blue, which is representative of our great country. We have the star in the middle, which some say represents Texas, which Juneteenth originated from. Some people say it's the star that represents one nation. And then you have the bursting star around it, which is a representation of, um, oh, and I forget, I'm sorry. And then, of course, the curved horizon, which represents a new horizon for not just African Americans, but for all people, because when one is free, all is free. And the concept of Juneteenth centers around dates and times. So we know that in officially January the 1st, 1863, Abraham Lincoln, who was a president at the time, issued the Emancipation Proclamation, which effectively freed slaves in the Union. Uh, and he in the Emancipation Proclamation, he specifically talks about the nature of that freedom and what that means. And there's debate, and we'll probably get into this as we get into the book in question. But in effect, it freed all of the slaves within the independent United States of America, and this was 1863. However, it wasn't until 1865, and some people are now saying 1869, that everyone got the memo. And so it was in Galveston, Texas, when people heard that there were still slaveholding activities going on in the South. The Union sent troops to Galveston, Texas on June 19th, 1865, and General Gordon Granger of the Union Army issued this General Order Number 3. And I will read that in entirety because it bears everything to do with Juneteenth. General Order Number 3 says, the people are informed that in accordance with a proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves, and the connection heretofore existing between them become that between employer and hired labor. The freed are advised to remain at their present homes and work for wages. They are informed that they will not be allowed to collect at military posts and that they will not be supported in idleness either there or elsewhere. Galveston, Texas, June 19th, 1865. And since then, we have recently, Juneteenth has become a national holiday, federal holiday, and still people don't know about it. Still people don't know anything about it. So we're getting the word out.
We are getting the word out. So in introduction to everybody, just obviously that is Pastor Wiley Hughes, who's talking about Juneteenth, which is today, and a longtime celebration. We'll talk a little bit maybe more about sort of the folk African-American celebration of Juneteenth, because of course it's been celebrated for a lot longer than it's been acknowledged by white supremacy America as a holiday. So I'm Jonathan Freirish. We are in Western New York on Juneteenth. We welcome everybody who has joined, which is really lovely to see everybody. You will be able to ask questions of us either in the chat during our conversation or afterwards, probably around 12:45, 12:40. We will invite everyone to come off mute and participate then. But we have a lot to talk about. Our premise for today, for lack thereof, is my deep attachment to the argument made in this book, The Nation That Never Was, Reconstructing America's Story by a law professor, Kermit Roosevelt III, who is in fact one of the great-grandchildren of Teddy Roosevelt. So what Professor Roosevelt argues quite convincingly in my mind is that we have erred significantly when we take four propositions of American history as if they are ours. And what does he mean by this? He means the four propositions are that our contemporary American principles are represented in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution as framed by the founders, that the founders and the American Revolution were, in fact, for those ideals. And so these four quintessential ideas of being American, Roosevelt argues, are in fact best abandoned entirely because, and here is the radical idea, that the people who are the true heirs of all of those spirits of the American Revolution, the Declaration of Independence as intended by Thomas Jefferson, the Constitution as framed by Madison and Hamilton, the fighting of the American Revolution, and the ideals of those founders, the true heirs of that are the Confederates. And that the real American Revolution is the Civil War. That is an American Revolution fought for the ideals that began to create the America we are working towards today. And began to is key here, because what Roosevelt is not trying to do is replace a mythos about the start of America with another one, but replace it with an understanding that there are good influences from people who were not great people, and that while the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments begin to redeem our Constitution and make it into a citizenship inclusive document that can, in fact, fulfill an egalitarian democracy for us all, that it's only the beginning. And that in this, we are trying to participate in a much more realistic understanding of who we are. So we can look at Abraham Lincoln and say, President Lincoln did some good things and some terrible things. And it doesn't affect our sense of the Civil War being the beginning of a better America for us all. We can look at the radical Reconstructionists and the writing of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments as the beginning of a better American legal system with gaps. What are those gaps? Well, because enslavement is not the only original sin of America. Anti-Black racism is one of a myriad of problems, and the other two problems are not solved by this group of people. One of those problems is patriarchy and sexism and misogyny, and women are explicitly left out of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. One of them is the genocide of indigenous people. And oh my God, we don't want to look at Abraham Lincoln's track record with exterminating, slaughtering Native Americans. So if we are to engage in history, we are going to need to do so more honestly, and we are going to need to do so with values that actually come from where we are. Now, there's a big question here, and I'm sure my introduction is filled with gaps. So I want to give Pastor Hughes a chance to ask questions and make comments.
Okay, I had to unmute myself. I mean, that's a great introduction, I think. And I, I, I don't really, I have so much to say about it. And so I'm just trying to figure out where to start. But yeah, having read the book almost all the way through, I got about three-quarters of the way through. What struck me the most is how what we think our country is, what we think our country is founded on, is not what our country is founded on. And that was a shock to me, and it forced me to go back. And that's why I didn't finish the book. Was I had to go back and I had to go back and read it again, because it dawned on me what he was trying to say, and I said, oh my gosh, it's something that I had sort of felt in the back of my mind, but I didn't have the language for it. And so to see that on paper, to see that written down was profound for me. So I had to go read it again and really sort of internalize it. But that was the biggest shock, was the fact that this guy is saying what I've been feeling, that I've always felt that there was some hypocrisy going on, the hypocrisy of our democracy. As Chris Rock said, how can we talk about all men being created equal when the men who wrote that owned slaves? And it seemed like there's this ideal of America that we're all supposed to strive for, but the only people striving for it are the victims of America. We're the only ones that are striving for this more perfect union, when everyone else who supposedly wrote this treatise for more perfect union are doing the exact opposite, right?
So, so Wiley, Reverend Hughes, what you really hit on is a key element, and I think of our current day, and why I find this book so compelling. There is a movement among humans, period, that who feel that things are not right, that things are troubling, that the way to right our society, the way to make things better, is to hearken back to somebody who got it right in the
Mm,
past.
right,
And this is what Roosevelt is arguing against.
right.
The the founders of this country did not get it right for
No, they
us,
didn't.
nor did they intend to. And
Right.
this is a key element of this is that when we read all men are created equal in the Declaration of Independence, we have a tendency to read it not in the thinking of Jefferson, but in the
Hmm.
thinking of Lincoln and the thinking of Dr. King.
Right.
Because Lincoln and Dr. King used those words
Right.
for different effect.
Yes.
And this is a very important element here because we need to start using the right tool for the right project.
Hmm.
And both Lincoln and Dr. King were using the Declaration of Independence because it was expedient
Hmm.
to ground their radical thinking in what was essentially a conservative document,
Hmm.
allowed them to reach more people. So it was politically effective. This is, we need to frame our political aims now, not based on effectiveness, but based on outcomes sought. And we can't use bad tools to create good outcomes.
Hmm.
Because then we open up to this idea that somehow or another it was okay that Jefferson not only was the father of slaves, but never freed his
Any of
progeny
his
who were
slaves. Yeah.
slaves.
Right.
That's not okay. It's not okay that more than half of the signers of the Declaration of Independence were, yes, Dr. Atchison, Audre Lorde's were warning about the
Yes. The
master's
master's
tools,
tools. Yeah. Yeah.
100%. Uh, it's not okay that more than half of the signers of the Declaration of Independence were owners, were enslavers. It's
Right.
not okay that we created a constitution that created minority rule, and still to this day,
Yeah.
so that the majorities of the populations in states, in formerly slave owning states, still are disenfranchised
Right.
in
Right.
2024. And
Right.
it's thought of okay by the
Yeah.
Supreme Court today.
To do that. Yeah. Yeah. That was another thing that struck me about the book, which was actually even more profound the more I think about it, was how he at least this is what he did to me. What the book did to me was it tore me away from lionizing the founders and lionizing the documents, in the sense that he forced me to look at the documents as tools, right, that were used in different ways by different people. Right. So Abraham Lincoln used the Declaration of Independence. He used the Constitution to further his political agenda in much the same way that Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. used the Declaration of Independence and he used the Constitution to further his agenda. And so that was profound for me because I had to really unlearn what I thought and believed about those documents. And in a sense, it plucked some strings that pulled on my own theology and how we lionize scripture, and how, scripture can also be used as a tool. And it could be in the hands of an evil person, scripture is quite evil. In the hands of a positive person, scripture is quite positive. So for me to sort of turn my understanding to more of a, okay, the documents are documents, they aren't holy and they aren't gospel, then it opened me up, to see things in a different light. And it was tough. This last couple of weeks has been tough for me. It's been tough for me, leading up to Juneteenth, because I'm like, oh my God, it's all a lie. We've been lied to. This is garbage. So I've been trying to come back. I had an epiphany about that. So yeah, very profound.
But so it's not a lie. It's depending on who speaks it. And this is so I wrote a piece about this and Jewish thinking that came out today in the Times of Israel blog that I put out. And so the way we read scripture is really important. One of the things that I think is a ground rule for, and we have Imam Daoud joined us today, making this our first session where we have, a Muslim included, which I'm thrilled by. Good people of faith who are also of good faith,
Mm,
good faith participants, do not quote scripture at each other to prove points.
exactly.
Because I can justify almost any argument you possibly want, including some terrible, terrible ones,
Hmm.
quoting scripture. How we read is much more important than what we read, right?
Correct.
So Chris Castro pointed out the use of originalism by the Supreme Court.
Originalism. Yeah. That's a new word for
And
me. I'm looking it up right now. Originalism.
okay, oh no. So don't look it up because Sherilyn Ifill takes down originalism. And if you want, we could have a much longer discussion about that. But the
Hmm.
case, the 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 conservative justices on the Supreme Court use originalism to make whatever argument they
Oh
want.
yeah. Oh yeah.
It's
Fundamentally.
not it's not originalism.
Right. It's not.
Nanette asks if this is next meeting's topic. Maybe.
Well, I
I'd
mean, I
have to,
mean, but it begs the discussion, because again, they're couching it as originalism, right? Because you hear this in their language. They talk about, well, this is what the founding fathers meant. This is what our democracy or our republic is based on, and that's not necessarily true. They're claiming originalism, but it's not original. It's not, you know what I mean?
yes, and Chris mentions Dahlia Lithwick's book, Lady Justice. Dahlia Lithwick is my teacher on all of this. She is the author of not just that book, but also the host of a podcast called Amicus. If you want to dive in, they did an entire series on originalism this spring, which covers it much better than I could. My footnote to originalism is this book, because The
Uh-huh.
Nation That Never Was reminds us that if someone is trying to justify an argument for us doing something ethically or legally today based on the original intent of the founders of our Constitution,
Right.
they are already making an argument
Already.
for
Right.
white supremacist rule.
That's right.
Rather, if we look at the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments and the way they have been misused,
Hmm.
because, of course, in the wake of Reconstruction, our Supreme Court decided to use those for the sake of corporate rights,
Hmm.
for the sake of undermining civil rights,
Right.
for the sake of undermining workers' rights,
Right.
uh, and and giving due process to people in power at the expense of people without power.
Hmm.
This is not the original intent of those
Right.
constitutional amendments. And we have the records of the radical Reconstructionists writing them
Right.
tell us original intent. So one of
Hmm.
the problems we have with this question of originalism is we have so many people claiming they know what the intent of a law was without actually reading the intent of the law.
Right.
For example, Clarence Thomas's latest opinion vis-a-vis bump stocks.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you want to talk about scripture being read poorly. He reads the original law of that banned machine guns in such a tortured way, and this is also, if you want to hear the full conversation of this, go to Amicus from last week, in such a tortured way as to claim that what they meant by function, the word function in the 1935 law prohibiting machine guns, was a person's use of their finger, not not the button on the gun.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Strained. So here is the thing, people of good faith, when we read a text, yes, Nanette, oy vey indeed. When we read a text, we have to agree upon our principles of reading first.
Mm-hmm.
We have to say, okay, we are in this together. I am not going to tell you that my version of scripture says one thing for the sake of excluding you,
Mm-hmm.
because that is for a bad purpose. I'm
Right.
not going to tell you that our Constitution, in its entirety, including all of its amendments, advocates for the denial of rights to women when we have an amendment that says women get to vote.
Right.
That means that the overall intent, the principle here, is that women have rights that should not be denied.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so if we're looking, selectively reading history for the sake of these things, we are in fact undertaking a blatant agenda of tyranny, of autocracy, of exclusion.
Right.
And yes, citizenship rights, Chris, absolutely. We we have some principles that we are using laws and the Constitution to pursue. If we can't agree upon those principles, then we shouldn't even be quoting texts at each other, because we have to go back to the drawing board about the principles.
Right. Right.
Um, Dr. Atchison says, until justice be done, talks about how many African American leaders participated in the language of the 14th Amendment. 13th, 14th, and 15th might be a better way to look at our origins. Absolutely. Right. So those amendments were crafted collectively. Um, yes, and Vicky, now women have fewer options over their
Yeah.
bodies, etc. Because again, what we
Because they're
have
rolling back.
is
Yeah.
is the rolling back of
Mm-hmm.
rights.
Right.
What I think, getting us back to Juneteenth and the nation that never was, to get us to try to keep us on topic here. What does it look like if we listen more closely to Frederick Douglass about July 4th? What does it look like if we listen to Professor Roosevelt about the idea that our founding documents ought to be the Gettysburg Address,
Mm-hmm.
which uses the
The
Declaration of
Declaration of
Independence
Independence. Right.
better?
Right.
What if we start, instead of reading the Bill of Rights to understand what our Constitution is about, we start by reading the 14th Amendment and the
Right.
15th Amendment, and we start with citizenship rights, the
Mm-hmm.
definition of citizenship.
Right.
How does this change our celebrations? How does this change the way we speak in public? How does this change the way we speak to each other? That's really my question for you, Pastor Hughes. What would we do? How would we do this differently? We are going to be gathering for Juneteenth today, the
Mm-hmm.
way many people gathered for Juneteenth this weekend. What's different with this consciousness?
And I'll let me answer that question with an observation. Um, I I don't know, and I can't take the credit or the blame for this. I had the bright idea of inviting everybody that I knew to my house for the Juneteenth cookout. And among African Americans, I get the raised eyebrows. Like, why are you inviting all these white people to the black cookout? And again, I cannot take the credit or the blame because it wasn't something that I wanted to do. It was something that I was led to do by spirit. And I had to think about it and pray about it. And one of the things, even in reading the Emancipation Proclamation, reading the General Order Number 3, reading Frederick Douglass's speech on the 4th of July, I and then reading, the Nation That Never Was, I'm struck with this idea that the achievements that we had post Civil War were in order to make the country a better country. But we cannot make the country a better country if we divide the country along class or race or gender, because we are one nation. And so when we talk about Juneteenth is really an American holiday. It's an American observation because, again, if one is enslaved, we are all enslaved. So to talk about the 2 years between the Emancipation Proclamation and Juneteenth is to say that, you know what, freedom took a long time, but it's coming. This is a triumph of America. It's not a triumph of black peoples per se, and that's how a lot of people view Juneteenth. Oh, this is a black people's holiday. No, it's really a celebration. Yes, it is a celebration of our freedom, so to speak, limited freedom, freedom-ish, freedom light. Uh, but at the same time, it is also a celebration of America doing what it can to get right, to do right, to live up to the ideals that it was founded upon. And I think that from that perspective, when we embrace the critique of Frederick Douglass wasn't critiquing America in a sense of we should burn the country to the ground and start over. He was critiquing America from a place of love. At least that's how I interpret it. I critique America a lot, but I critique it from a place of love. If I did not love this country, I would not have put on a uniform and fight overseas. I would not have pledged my life to this country if I did not love it. So when I criticize America, when I criticize racism, when I criticize exploitation of the poor, when I criticize the war on the poor, I do so from a place of I believe in this country. We have to get it right. But we cannot get it right if we don't acknowledge these inconsistencies, right?
So an argument for complexity, an argument for we are working on being better, but we have to confront what doesn't work in order to get better.
Exactly.
And uh, and the idea that we were at some point perfect and we need to return to it is damaging.
It is very damaging. I think that's part of the problem. Yes.
All right. So Nanette is holding her breath, so I think I am going to relieve her. And there's a lot to talk about here. I'm going to let everybody unmute themselves if you want. And but Nanette, you wanted to offer something.
Yeah, that 2 years in between, I think that, I'm a little back and forth about inviting white people into the whole Juneteenth celebration, because for white people, that 2 years in between is what Juneteenth is about, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
It's about recognizing that slavery was that integral to this country that those people up and thwarted the law for 2 years. It was that important. And white people need to know that, and they need to acknowledge that, and they need to acknowledge the integral foundation of slavery as a part of this country, that those people were willing to thwart the law for 2 years.
So
And as white people, I feel you can't celebrate you can't you can't understand the celebration of it unless you understand that. You
Okay,
can't be walking around talking about Happy Juneteenth. Shut up. I'm
I hear
sorry.
you. I hear you. I hear you, Nanette. I hear you, and I agree with you 100%. But well, let me say it like this. I agree with you what you're saying 100%, and I feel like the best way to teach people is to show them. And how else will we show them unless they are at the table? I do understand the trepidation. I do understand the mistrust. I understand that, and don't think for 1 second that I just opened up and invited everybody without thinking about the context, without thinking about exactly what you said. I wrestle with it all the time. But at the same time, I feel like how else are we going to teach, even though I hate doing that? I hate being that token Negro called to teach the white man about himself. I hate that. But I find myself in those situations more often than I like. And again, that's a God thing. That's not my thing. Because if it were up to me, things would be different. But that's the nature of my position as a pastor and as a mouthpiece for God. I do believe that the celebration aspect of Juneteenth is African American, and I don't believe inviting white people to a cookout is taking away from that celebration, especially not the way that I do it. Because, like I said, for me, it's all about Juneteenth. It's all about reading the Emancipation Proclamation. It's all about reading the General Order Number 3. It's all about educating those who don't know so that they know that this is what this cookout is about. And this time, I did not invite other people to cook the food. So, so um, I'm keeping it real, but at the same time, I'm also inviting people into a limited space so that they can understand and that they can they've never experienced this kind of thing before. No one has ever invited them. No one has ever told them about Juneteenth. They know it's a holiday now, but most people, especially in my neighborhood, they don't understand a doggone thing about Juneteenth. And so I feel like this is an opportunity for them to learn.
So I think there's really a continued conversation, and we'll let Nanette come in again in a sec. From the material we looked at last time, from belonging without othering, and this question of Juneteenth,
Mm-hmm.
because really the question is solidarity versus inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
And, Pastor Hughes, for better or for worse, you are the token African American in so many places.
Yeah,
You
I don't like it, but yeah,
you and your family are ambassadors, and you
mm.
have and
Unwilling.
and I sympathize, because my life has led me to be inadvertently the ambassador for my people as well
Right.
in many places where I am the sole Jewish representative. Now,
Mm.
these are not equivalents, and I don't.
Right.
I want to make very clear to everybody listening that I do not in any way, shape, or form think that because I can put on or take off a kippah and yarmulke, I understand what it's like to be in a black skin. I do
Mm-hmm.
not. I work to understand it, but that's
Yeah.
different. And I think what Nanette, what you're asking really, and I'll ask you to clarify in a minute, is how do we create, and this goes back to the Malcolm X observation. How do we create powerful Black solidarity experiences on the one hand, which are needed, right? The need for a strong sense of peoplehood, a strong sense of identity, a supported sense of identity where no one questions who we are
Mm-hmm.
in our home, in our community, whatever. That's really vital to the
Mm-hmm.
sense of identity formation. However, we are not only that thing.
Mm.
We are also people in a multitude of communities with a multitude of identities. I am not just a Jewish white man. I am many other things.
Right.
And in that, I have to cross over and find other bridges, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
what the Belonging Without Othering book is
Right.
asking us to do, to have layered identities and to build bridges across them. So
Mm-hmm.
we need both. I, for example, heard a number of people say with regard to the Buffalo community Juneteenth celebration that took place this past weekend, that they preferred it to be a Black solidarity event,
Right.
that they did not want white people showing up.
Right. And I questioned
And
that because I think the first time that I went to the Juneteenth festival in Buffalo last year, I saw a whole lot of white people, and I was kind of surprised. I'm coming from Atlanta, Georgia, where Juneteenth festival has been a staple. I mean, we've been doing it for many, many years, and it's always been a so-called black thing. And so when I got up here and I saw many white people participating, I was a bit perplexed. And so I asked some questions, but unfortunately, I didn't know enough people to ask the right people. So I ended up asking other white people in the community, and their responses at the time, I did not agree with them at all. But as I did some more soul searching and learning, I kind of understood where they were coming from. They felt like Juneteenth is a black, yes, it is an African American oriented celebration, but ultimately it is a triumph of America. Or if triumph is too broad a word, it is a step in the right direction for America. And I can kind of understand that. I can get with that. In fact, I subscribe to that. It is a step in the right direction. Is it the end all be all? No. Is it the reparations that we are owed? No. Is it, finally America stepping up? No. But it is a start. It is a start.
it is a start. I'm going to ask Nanette to step in if she wants still. Uh, let's
When
see.
when does Nanette not have something to say? When does Nanette not want to give in? Dr. Hughes, I'm completely with you on that. And um, and having white people involved in Juneteenth, having them show up on Fillmore, it is important, but they need to know why they're there.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and if it's just to show up and be like, "Hi, we're white, we're here," stay home. You know, but if you're here because you recognize, that Black people have had a completely separate experience of America, and this is theirs, and this is for them, and I want to show up and with knowledge and understanding and support that, because I think the most important way that white people can show up um, for Juneteenth celebrations, especially here in Buffalo, is to support vendors.
Mm, right.
Support, take some of this white money out of Orchard Park and put it on Jefferson, put it
Precisely.
on Fillmore. Yeah.
Precisely.
But in a recognition of why all the white money is in Orchard Park and ain't none on Jefferson,
Hmm.
that still needs to be in there. So if white people are just going to show up, happy Juneteenth, just that doesn't work.
Mm.
But I'm not saying they are to be excluded altogether.
Right. So Nanette, our question is how to bring those who've shown up along. Rita wants to say something. We'll let Rita say it. Let me invite Rita to unmute. And then, Rita, you got that? Because I think this question of how do we get people who want to be allies to participate better is really an interesting question.
Mm.
Because though, and talking about Dr. King's letter to white moderates, right? How do we involve well-intentioned majority allies in a better project? Rita, you can unmute now. So if you're still here and want to ask something. Because I think, I think we struggle with this, and it's at the heart, Nanette, of the white fragility conversation, which is how do we engage with one another in an inviting and still demanding way, we need to demand that we learn our history. We need to demand that we don't approach people in ignorance that might also be harmful. However, we need on the flip side of that to say, we're not going to get there if we don't reach across to the people who
Right.
are at least reaching out, even if they are doing so in the most inappropriate way.
Right. So my my mother asked, because I call my mother just about every day. My mother asked me what I'm doing. I said I'm cooking food for the Juneteenth thing, and she says, "Oh yeah, you inviting all those white people again?" I said, I said, "Yeah." She said, "Why do you do that?" I said, "Mom, it's just a cookout. It's just a cookout. It's not. It's not. We shall overcome. It's not a protest rally. It's not. We're not picketing. We're not boycotting. We're not sitting in. It's just a cookout. We're coming to eat food and to fellowship together. It's an opportunity for people to meet other people. That's really what it's all about. I'm not, and I guess I didn't I never thought of it from that perspective, where to me I'm treating it as an opportunity and not as a path to liberation. As somebody said, yeah, as Dr. Atchison said, it's not a path to liberation. No, I am not trying to save white people or America by cooking collard greens and cornbread. I just inviting other people to participate with me. That's all. To eat with me in fellowship. That's all.
So I'm going to push back and say it is in fact a path to liberation,
Mm,
because we're not going to have the conversations where people overcome their discomfort about not knowing stuff if we're not actually in relationship with each other. And so what you've done is you've turned a holiday that is a mystery to most of the people in Orchard Park who have no clue what it really is about. And
mm,
you've said, come and eat with me.
mm,
And not come and eat with me if you agree with me. Come and eat with me if you know my history. No, just come and eat with me.
hmm.
And that is the start. That's where we need to begin, right? You and myself and the people in this group here are the germination of something better,
Mm.
where we're willing to say, yes, go ahead, ask the offensive question.
Well, that's true. That's true. Yeah, you're right.
And because we're creating a sense that if you've shown up to
Mm,
something called Accomplices for Justice,
mm,
hosted by, you know, a white rabbi and an African American minister, the likelihood is you're probably interested in some value system that we might all share.
right. Right.
So instead of, and we talked about litmus tests last time,
Mm,
instead of saying, okay, you can't join our group if you don't agree to this list of things,
mm,
we make an open invitation. Uh, and and we ask people to show up. We don't have any ground rules.
right.
And then we figure out we'll handle it and we'll go down that road together. And I learn something from you every time we talk.
Right. Likewise. And you
And
you make me read, brother. You make me read. Oh my gosh.
and because the reading load is on me,
Mm,
because at some point in the last 15 years I realized I'd read a lot more white men than I'd read of anybody else,
right.
and that I needed to read more women authors, more people of color authors, more
Right.
international authors, more
Right.
voices. That my head, and let's call it what it is, right? As a rabbi, I spent a lot of time reading dead Jewish authors.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of the
Right.
way we are educated.
Right.
Uh, they happen to mostly be white or Middle Eastern, but nonetheless, they're mostly men and they're mostly part of the patriarchy. And
Mm,
therefore, in order to have a different voice in my head, I need to read.
right.
And as Chris says, addressing the balance. And Chris and I have had this conversation in a library, believe it or not, about how we take on an expansive reading project. All right. Nanette wants to come in again. I am going to let everybody unmute themselves, and then anybody who wants to can turn on your if I can get to it, turn on your video as well, and join us all for an open conversation. Nanette, what did you want to say?
Well, I still got my rollers in my hair, so I'm not doing video.
That's okay.
But I'm gonna say something here. And it's y'all get ready now. But
Oh Lord.
remember all that you read in White Fragility now, okay? My
Mm,
experience has been, as a person who is running around Buffalo trying to get gigs as a speaker to white audiences about race, my experience has been in Western New York, white people are mostly interested in coming to these things and coming to these conversations to be pat on the head for being good white people. And they come to I'm coming to your thing this afternoon, Pastor Hughes, and my
thank you.
expectation is there's going to be a lot of white people who are there because they want to be seen as the good white people, and they want their cookie. And then when you bring the real, which is what the gathering or the workshop or the cookout was about, they look at you but I'm here, why are you tripping?
Yeah.
I'm not the one, it's those guys.
Mm,
So this cookout will only be a fail if all the white people come in that kind of spirit. if
mm,
they if they come and we can't have a conversation about, okay, that's what this country was built on, these people kept these people against the law
yeah.
for an extra 2 years, and
Mm,
that's part of what built Orchard Park.
mm.
If we can't have that conversation, then this will have been moot.
It's interesting you said that, Nanette. I'm gonna tell you another story. The last year when I first did this, and it grew to epic proportions, and I wasn't ready. I was not prepared for it at all. Um,
Oh, for real?
I wasn't ready. Let me tell you, I at that time last year, I knew about 5 African Americans from Buffalo. And I only wanted to invite those 5 people black people that I knew to my cookout. Just 5. And again, when someone, you know, listening into conversations, hey, I hear you're having a cookout. Can I come? I was hesitant to do that. And my wife said, well, they're from your church. Do you think that would be a good look if you deny them to come to the cookout? You live right next door to the church. They're going to see you anyway. They live down the street. Why don't you invite them anyway? And I said, I don't know if I want to invite white people to the cookout, not because I don't think they belong, but because, blah, blah, blah. Well, when the white people came to the cookout, when they listened to the Emancipation Proclamation, when they learned about Juneteenth, this is what one elder lady told me. She said, do you know that every that the deed to every house in the village of Orchard Park has a clause that
Mm,
prohibits African Americans from purchasing the land?
Mm-hmm.
And
right.
I was like, what are you talking about? And she says, the people who saw, and we're talking, like you said, Nanette, the founders of Orchard Park, because what we call the village of Orchard Park was purchased from 1 or 2, maybe 3 families that owned all this
Mm,
land, and they parceled out this land to homeowners and home buyers with the clause that you could not sell the land to African Americans. That was in the clause. It's in some of these deeds. And this lady showed me a copy of the deed to her house 3 blocks down the
uh,
street, and
Mm-hmm.
right there in the deed, it was there in plain English. We're not talking about 1886. We're talking about 1987. 1987.
mhm.
So I would have never known that if I had not opened my home to these white people. So on the one hand, you're right. There are going to be some people who come to this cookout who just want to be patted on the back for showing up in Black spaces and go and tell their friends how liberal and how good they are. And then there are some people who are going to come and really get what I'm trying to do. And they're going to come and they're going to learn and they're going to ask the right questions. And I'm going to learn as well. So, to me, it's a payoff. It's a good payoff.
And it's worth it. And it's worth taking the chance.
I think it's so worth it.
It's worth it. Yeah.
Any other questions, comments, thoughts, reactions? Yes, Elise.
So, I participated in the parade on Saturday with UB. And I think the thing that I was most impressed by is that part of the UB contingent was a group of people called White Coats for Black Lives. And it's a local chapter of what I guess is a national organization that is trying to address disparities in healthcare. And I thought that was really, to me, it kind of blew my mind that there was such an organization. I shouldn't be surprised, I suppose, but it kind of blew my mind that there was an organization like that. And so part of my participation in Juneteenth is to see what I can learn, what's new to me, what's going on. And it's also a chance for me to, catch up with some people that I used to work with who participate in the parade. So, I hope I'm allowed to be there. I will try to be I am supportive of the vendors that are there and the people that are there. And so that's me.
Thank you, Chris. I put the link to their website in the chat as well if people are interested in White Coats for Black Lives. Helene, you wanted to?
Yeah, I think the organization you may be referring to is called SURGE, Stand Up for Racial Justice. And it's a group of white people who believe that racism is largely possible because of white people's silence. So they're a group of white people who say, we're not going to be silent. We're going to speak out wherever we see injustice. But I also think, for me anyway, it's important to think back to how particularly white men justified slavery way back when for their own purposes, largely because they wanted free labor, because they wanted, they were greedy, there are lots of reasons. But at the end of the day, way to justify it is to say that Black folks are not human. They're not fully human, or you couldn't do this, right?
Right.
So, where we are now after all these many decades and centuries is not all that far away from where we were then, in that racism has become so institutionalized in every American institution. Well, you're talking about Orchard Park and, their indoctrination of it in there, whatever it was that you mentioned. But it's everywhere. It's in our financial institutions with redlining. It's in our in education, where Black kids are suspended more often for the very same infraction that a white kid would be suspended for. It's everywhere. And I think that what white people can do is to raise their consciousness, to be very aware of what they're thinking and what they're doing and how they're being influenced by practices that they've grown up with. That we don't even realize. I mean, you'll hear a lot of white people say, well, I'm not racist. I'm not a racist. I don't know. To me, that's a sure clue that they are. But, we all are. We can't help it because it's everywhere. And so unless we're very conscious about what we're saying, how we're acting, what we're doing, how we're thinking, we're not really working on the problem.
Absolutely. Thank you, Helene. Haj Dawood wanted to offer a comment as well.
Yes, good morning. Am I being heard? Am I unmuted?
You are. We can hear you.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. First of all, I'd like to thank the Rabbi and Reverend for, I think conversations of this nature are very important, very necessary, especially in times like these. My thoughts on Juneteenth, my main thought about it is that I think we missed the point. Celebrating Juneteenth is fine, and as was mentioned by somebody earlier, most people still don't know what it's about. But I think what's more important is to focus on, why we had to have a Juneteenth in the first place, and
Mm,
that is the history of slavery, and not only slavery, chattel slavery, and how it could have taken 250 almost years, that a legally sanctioned, system, which is unlike slavery, has been going on in this world for a long time. But there was no other system like this where, uh, you know, so-called slaves, captives were considered to be less than human, and they legally were not able to be educated. It was against the law to read and write, and people were bred like animals, and this was legally sanctioned, and by the church, by the way. Right, this was basically a Christian institution. It was just justified, by the church. And Kenneth Stamp published a book in 1956 called The Peculiar Institution. I'm sure you're all aware of it, where he contradicted some of the other people who were saying, like you hear today, like I think the governor of Florida saying that, oh, there was some good things about slavery. It actually
yeah.
benefited folks. And in 1956, Kenneth Stamp wrote this book, which he decried all of that. It was not a nice thing. It was not beneficial. It was totally, it was inhumane. It was ungodly, you know, and so forth and so on. So, my introduction to the realities of slavery came with a lecture from Malcolm X. I like to call him Alhaji Malik Shabazz, as a freshman in high school. Well, I knew about slavery, but I didn't know the details. Well, he put me down to the details of it, the horrific details. And so I started researching and reading, and I read a book called Before the Mayflower by Lerone Bennett. Back in the 60s, that was one of the few really credible books that you could get at that time. And even today, uh, great book. So I think we need to know more about the prehistory of Juneteenth, and why we had to have a Juneteenth, why there needed to be the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, why there needed to be an Emancipation Proclamation, so forth and so on.
Mm,
My second point on the recent issue about white people, uh, one of the faulty thinking, one of the, I think the falsehoods of our thinking that we is monolithism. We tend to put everybody in one barrel. I hate it when they do it with black folks. I hate it when they do it with white folks, because the fact is that white folks have always been involved in the African liberation struggle. There have been white folks who died. Could go and name a few of them. Everybody knows about John Brown and his 6 sons, and
mm,
William
mm,
Lloyd Garrison, and Harriet Beecher Stowe, and on, and the Quakers, and there's always Harriet Tubman's Underground Railroad would never have worked without the complicity of white folks.
mm,
And we know this, So I think that we should, when we see folks show up, to our affairs, whether it be Black History Month or Juneteenth, we shouldn't just automatically assume that, well, they shouldn't be here. It's not
mm,
necessarily, not necessarily true. you know. Uh, Dr. King, my last point on that issue is that Dr. King's last book, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community, where and he quoted strongly from Kenneth Stamp's book, The Peculiar Institution.
mhm,
And then there he was saying, and in many words, that we need a coalition, in order to defeat this thing, this anti-racism. It must be done by all of us. We're all involved in this. We are all complicit to some extent. We actually share the same blood, you know. We don't like to think about it, but it's true. We're actually a family, which gets to the bigger issue of the fact that really racism is a joke. Racism is always
yeah,
it's a hoax.
yeah,
It's only one race. It's a human race. We all share the same blood. We got the same parents, Adam and Eve. And this is a hoax and a joke and a political game that's been played on us for years. People have made money about it. People have been enslaved. People have been abused, and all kinds of stuff under the name of racism. So we need to get rid of it, and it's going to take all of us to address the issue.
Thank you so much.
It's
for your comments, Haj. Thank you for being here. Thank you all for showing up today. It is, I am so grateful for all of your participation. I'm so grateful for your support. A number of you have become financial supporters of this effort. I put in the chat links to both a website where you can join and make a regular donation, Patreon, and there's another link in there for if you want to make a one-time donation. I will re-put those in there so that they are there again. And we are, Pastor Hughes and I are really humbled by your support, by the idea that you have come in and joined us for this journey. And I think Haj Daoud, you really articulated it so much better by saying the degree to which Dr. King called upon us to have a multi-faith coalition to do this. And getting white people to show up as accomplices as opposed to allies for their cookie, as Nanette said, is really important. But we may not get them to do that until we get them to show up for the cookie, right? Showing up for the cookie may in fact be the first step. And terrible as it is that we have so many people who are so unfamiliar with the horrendous history of our country and the degree to which all of us have benefited, so many of us have benefited from stolen land and stolen labor and oppression. It's horrific. And of course, it's very frustrating to encounter somebody probably like me, who at some point or another said, oh my God, I suddenly understand how racist our system is, as if it hasn't been that way for 400 years. So,
Right.
Feel free to send me to people that you feel need to have a conversation with a white person who's willing to at least take the damage so that we don't have to put all of our African-American friends on the firing line with ignorant white people. So with that, I really want to thank everybody.
Rabbi,
yes.
Could I finish? And there are those of us who are completely willing. I mean, I like Pastor Hughes, I'm a person who has put myself, out there and made it plain and clear that I am completely willing. So there are but you need to find us because not everybody is down. Some people are like, you know what? I'm just trying to do my job. Okay. Don't ask me about Juneteenth.
Well, and again, as I like to say, and inspired in large part by UNINET, if Black people knew how to solve racism, it'd be done with already.
Hello.
Hey, you better say that again.
So if Black people knew how to solve racism, it would be done with. We have to work together to figure this out. It is not something that like someone's holding on to the secret. And if only, our African-American friends would share it with us, we'd be done. It's only the beginning. So thank you, everybody. I'm going to stop the recording so that everybody can feel less